Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of We Watch Shudder. My name is Michelle, and who's here with me?
It's JD. I got a little ahead of myself there. We do watch Shudder, Michelle.
Every time I intro, you do get ahead of yourself. Every time you're like, I'm so excited. I forgot.
Why am I not talking? The podcast has started. Why am I not talking? No.
Like, oh no. Have I forgotten to speak? How much silence has there been?
Oh no. This is unacceptable. I have to make sounds come out of my face immediately.
Ugh. As long as they're not sounds coming out of other places.
Well, ups and downs. You never know how that's going to turn out. Could be good, could be bad.
If this is your first time tuning in, yes, this is how we always are. Hello, welcome. Thanks
just
for checking
real
us
weird.
out.
Thanks for tuning in. Yeah. Also, if it's your first time tuning in, thank you for checking out the show. We'd love to know how you found out about it. Maybe shoot us a quick message on one of our social medias or an email. We'll give you all the details on that at the end of the show, so you don't have to worry about it right now. But hi, we watch Shudder. That's why the show is called We Watch Shudder. Do you know what Shudder is, Michelle? Tell them what Shudder is.
I do. Shudder is a horror and horror adjacent streaming service, and we like it and we watch it and then we talk about it. Hence the name.
Yeah, they get exclusive distribution for some movies, and they help produce some movies that are Shudder originals, and we watch those originals and exclusives. We've got a brand new Shudder original, I believe, this week, Michelle. Is that not correct? Yes, a Shudder
that is correct.
original. Talking about a film called The Unheard. Michelle, what did you know about The Unheard before we sat down to watch it today?
I knew that we talked that I would intro this episode. Then it immediately flip-flopped. I'm just like, you take control. Anyway, The Unheard. I had not unheard anything about it besides seeing the poster. I knew nothing.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about the movie at all. I knew that it was directed by a fella named Jeffrey A. Brown, who also made a Shudder original a few years back called The Beach House. I don't know that I've ever seen The Beach House, but I have now seen The Unheard. And so that's what we're talking about, Shudder original here today. Sometimes we will read a description as it's prepared on the Shudder website or on IMDb. Sometimes those descriptions are super spoilery, and it makes us wonder, why would anybody put this description up here and give all that stuff away? And today, we're going to read half of the description.
Yeah. We argued about the second sentence.
We were like, is it too much? Is it not too much? And from Michelle's perspective of knowing literally nothing, here's what I will tell you. If you've seen the trailer for this film, which I did see the trailer, then you will not have anything spoiled for you by the description that you would have had spoiled by the trailer. But Michelle, like a smart person who loves and respects this podcast, unlike me, who's just here for the glory, she took it seriously, didn't see a thing, and there are definitely things here that would have been spoilery for her. So we're going to read, there's two sentences. I'm going to do this from the IMDb website because they do it in two separate sentences, and that gives me a convenient place to stop. And so here is the description of The Unheard, today's Shudder original. Are you ready?
Yeah, I am.
Here we go. Chloe Graydon undergoes an experimental procedure to restore her hearing. Period. That's the movie we're watching today, guys. It's a movie
I honestly like that because medical horror is one of my favorite subgenres. So to me, I'm like, do they wake up on the table and they're paralyzed and they don't know and they're still doing surgical procedures on them? That's terrifying. Is it that kind of movie? It's not. It's not at all.
It might be. Maybe.
Might be.
I don't know. We're going to find out, guys.
You should know because we should have both watched the movie by now.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, Michelle, the people listening don't know.
Oh. Unless they also watched the movie before
that's
checking
true.
out the
If they're ahead of us, some of you probably watched the movie already. Some of you are are probably weirdly waiting to hear how we felt about it before you watch it. That's silly. Just go watch the movie if you think you're going to watch it. If you don't like scary movies, Michelle, we like to tell people, well, let's, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here. Why don't we hit,
you got like a
everybody?
checklist of things to get through, and you're just getting through all of them without like, actually, you're like, I got to cross this off the list. Talk about the social media, but later, but first. But now, before we do that, let's do this.
I just got back
Speed run.
from taking the dog for a walk, and anytime I take the dog for a walk and get all that fresh air and oxygen and a little bit of physical exertion, it makes me feel like a
Gross.
completely different person. I know, right?
Gross.
Here's the one thing we know for sure. We can never record one of these immediately after I walk the dog again. The dog
How's
rubs off
walking
on
now
me.
that
He's very excitable, and he's like, I got to do all the things. And I think it just, I kind of imprint onto the dog a little bit, and then I get
You're so
excited and wanna
chipper,
do all the
and
things.
I know that you got way in a better headspace after losing a toe, and now you're going for walks and getting in a really good headspace. Is there a relation? Is there something about your feet that makes you just feel better?
Maybe
walking, using your feet.
I guess I'm not sure. I'm not. They're very. We could be onto something here. I think
Let's
it's a
dig into
combination
that.
of. I think it's a combination of weirdness in my feet, and this dog. This dog is very, very weird. My mom's dog is living with me now, guys, because mom's having medical issues and seeing doctors and stuff. So I'm taking care of the dog. And this dog, let me tell you, some days he's the best thing that ever happened to me, and some days I want to throw him out in the goddamn snowbank. This little shit. Yeah,
Welcome to dog ownership.
I'm looking at you, buddy. Anyway,
I had a
we got off
really,
the
really
rails
good.
here.
I had such a good segue, but it would have been a spoiler segue. So I'm just gonna I would like
Oh.
credit that I would have had a very good segue to get back to the point about talking about the movie. But I did
Okay.
not say it because it would have given away too much. But I just need you to know that I had a very clever segue that I did
Awesome.
not use.
I will believe you, and maybe when we
Thank
get into
you.
the spoilery part of the show, if you remember what the segue was, we can talk about it.
I have already
But-
forgotten. I just remember it was very good.
Oh, right on. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, then, Michelle, something we like to
Mhm.
start out doing is telling people our spoiler-free thoughts on the movie that we were talking about today. So, brand
we
new
do.
Shudder original, just released to the public today, The Unheard. Michelle, hit us with your spoiler-free thoughts.
Well, a couple episodes ago, I had come up with this thing where sometimes I don't like a movie, but I want to be very honest about it, but I don't want to be a dick because I feel like the people involved, I don't want to hurt their feelings, but I do want to be honest about how I felt about something. And in those cases, I would give the movie 5 stars, but with an asterisk, because nobody can be mad if you get a perfect score. This movie would fall into that realm, unfortunately. So I'm going to give it a 5 asterisk, and then the asterisk, when you look at the bottom of the page, would be 1.5.
Ooh. So,
Yeah,
Michelle...
I'm disappointed.
Michelle was disappointed and gave it a 1.5. Her story was a whole lot longer. I'll just distill it down to its essence for you there. She won't she won't score movies low to hurt your feelings, but I mean, I'm a jerk. So no, I'm kidding. I agree with at some point, yeah, we've had a lot of talks about this because like the more and more that we get into talking about these movies, the more I'm experiencing movies that I don't necessarily think, like, they're not a poorly made movie. It's not a bad movie per se. There are just things about it that didn't work for me. This movie, for me, I think has a lot of really interesting ideas, but the script just overall was kind of disjointed. There are little things that they start to do and then never follow up on. There are things that are there that just make me go, okay, but why? Which leads to it being like a 2-hour movie. Again, I hate to be a broken record about so many things we talk about, but I feel like if this were like 90 to 100 minutes rather than a little over 2 hours, and there was a little bit more focus focus in the script, it would have worked better for me. So for me, there are things about this movie that I really enjoyed, though. The performance by the lead performer, Lachlan Watson. We'll talk more about that in the spoiler section. But I loved their performance here. And there are directorial things that I really enjoy them in and of itself. I just have a little bit of difficulty with how it overall relates to the movie. Like, it felt like there were some stylistic things happening here where somebody just said, oh, that would look cool, but didn't stop to think overall how it was going to play. So I didn't hate the film by any means. It didn't quite work for me. I'm giving this one 2 skulls.
2 skulls. That puts us at an average of 1.75 human skulls out of 5.
Right. Specifically human skulls. That's very important to note here, guys.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever specified the species of the skull. Shudder does not tell us their rating system what type of skull it was. I figured we should probably just make a statement that it is human skulls.
They do generally resemble human skulls, but then again, human skulls generally resemble, like, Neanderthal skulls and orangutan skulls.
Why you gotta be specific?
You gotta specify.
Specific about it.
Now, if we were okay, so let's take this tangent to its logical extreme, Michelle. If we're saying it was on the average between the two of us as an experience a 1.75 human skull movie, then what does that translate to if this were, say, chimpanzee skulls?
Oh, that's difficult. I was already factoring like 30 rat skulls. I wasn't thinking like a similar skull size. I was thinking like in proportion to a much smaller rodent. I thought because you had rats, you were going to ask me about rat skulls.
That's fair.
Chimpanzee, I have no idea if their skulls are bigger. They probably are. Maybe not. Chimpanzees are smaller.
So you're taking this literally like the value of the value of the skull is based on its size? Is that what you're saying?
I'm also trying to figure out, is it a 2-dimensional plane, like a chimpanzee skull on top of a human skull, if you're looking at it as an X-ray, would just be slightly smaller? But yet, if you're looking at it on a 3D plane, then I bet you could put like 1.5 chimpanzee skulls. Also, are we talking about, are the skulls in full form, are these like powder skulls? Because then it's a completely different thing, because there's way more material to work with, and I feel like that's going to give a huge variable. I feel like I am spiraling. I'm spiraling now. I regret ever specifying the skulls.
So 1.75 was our average here, with a caveat from both of us that, again, we're talking about our experience with the film, not necessarily judging the film itself. Because as longtime listeners will tell you, when we genuinely have a problem with a film, we'll tell you we genuinely have a problem with it. But so that's the spoiler-free stuff, guys. If you do want to go check out the film, now would be the time that you want to do that. You want to go do that before we talk about it in detail and spoil a bunch of things. Hit that pause button right about meow. All right, then. Michelle. So, again, this is another one, and I think we're kind of on the same page here. Tell us why the movie specifically. Well, I guess again, I'm all jumbled and out of order.
I'm ready
what
for
I
the
need
summary.
To do is I need to put in a checklist is what I need to do, because then I'll remember to do all of these things in order. What's happening right now is my ADHD is like every now, like I'll be in the middle of one thing and then another thought is like, oh, don't forget to do this, and I'm already doing it again. Michelle, for the people who didn't watch the film, would you summarize the story for them, please, while I try to calm down a little bit? This episode is weird. We can't do this in the middle of the day ever again. Oh, my God.
We knew this. We knew we can't do midday episodes. Also, I think that we could also just, edit the episodes after we record them, but that sounds awful, and I am completely vetoing this. I like the idea of them getting us in our genuine awful, socially awkward, why are we doing this phase.
Let me just point out then what just happened there is you just proposed an action and then immediately vetoed your own proposal.
This is what it's like to be me.
Anyway, tell
It's
us about
constant.
the movie.
Is this a good idea? Is it a bad idea? It's a bad
Focus,
idea, you idiot.
Focus, Michelle.
Okay.
Focus.
Summary.
Tell us about the movie.
Okay, I think we both need to breathe. Okay, this movie, it's a very quiet, subdued movie, and our energy does not reflect how this movie is, where it's very yeah, it's not us. Anyway, there is a person named Chloe Graydon, and they lost their hearing at the age of 8. And now they're doing an experiment in order to see if they can recover their hearing. And they do recover their hearing. And are they having auditory hallucinations? Why is Chloe hitting on their doctor? Who is this weird guy who's kind of like too friendly and a little too personal? Why is the color in this movie shifting a lot? Oh man, she's going to get murdered. What happened to all the audio stuff? End credits. That's basically what this movie was. It was a lot. It was all over the place. But I do want to start off with some very, very high praise for this movie. I love the sound design.
Oh yeah.
If not for the sound design, I would have been very much not enjoying this movie for a lot of different reasons. But the way that they bring you in by making it so that everything is so muffled in the way that Chloe is experiencing the world, it really, I love that. I do wish that when she begins using her reader to understand people, that the audio didn't become completely clear. You know, it then becomes crystal clear as though there was no issue. And I feel like it loses a lot of the charm in that, and that if there was still some distortion, to make it clear that, you know, she's not hearing everything going on in the world, she's just understanding and communicating better. I think that would have been more effective, because then when her hearing does come back, it would have had a bigger impact, because you as the viewer would also have perfect clarity into sound of this world. So while I loved it, I wish that they had just gone a little bit more experimental with it, you know, and done that for the beginning of the movie and not really gone back to crystal clear.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Also, in a similar sense, I like the idea of this experimental procedure and her hearing coming back. It was weird to me that the hearing that I believe I said her hearing. This should be their. We should point out the performer Lachlan Watson, who plays Chloe in the film, uses they them pronouns, and the film itself I don't think ever says
the
specifically.
character is she, and it is in the description of the movie, which is why I had to clarify that too. Yes, because Lachlan Watson is non-binary. Chloe Graydon is uses she, her pronoun.
Okay, perfect.
So we're good. I researched.
I didn't flub. Just good opportunity to point that sort of stuff out. By the way, it's Trans Day of Visibility. Shout out to everybody in our lives who is trans or affiliated with LG. Affiliated is not the word I wanted to use.
I was going to say,
oh my
horror
God,
and horror adjacent.
JD.
Are you going trans and trans adjacent?
No. But we see you, we respect you, we love you. Trans rights are human rights. Love is love. All that good stuff, guys. So I wish when her hearing comes back, when Chloe's hearing comes back, I wish it hadn't come back so completely immediately. I wish it had been more of a process, right? Like, I wish her hearing had become more and more clear the further in we go. And I wonder if maybe that was a decision where because what happens is her hearing does come back crystal clear from the procedure, but then they also start adding more distortion and static and weirdness back in, because that's part of the plot of the story, right? So I wonder if that maybe was a part of it. If they said, well, we're going to be putting all of this back in, we have to make a decision and just let it go completely right out of the gate. But yeah, I definitely would have liked a little bit more balance there, because I agree that opening sequence and the few sequences they give us where we are experiencing Chloe's sense of hearing is really engaging and absorbing. Like, it forces you to pay attention to what's happening on the screen because you don't have the sound anymore. And I thought it was just a really effective thing that they maybe could have done a little bit more with.
I was fully invested in the story at the beginning, even if it felt kind of off. I will say that you praised Lachlan Watson's performance in this. I loved Lachlan Watson in The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. I did not love this performance, but I also don't necessarily think it was their fault. A lot of it is that they're the only person on screen for a lot of this. The tone was set as this being kind of a muted and very kind of soft. Like it's I think they said it was the Cape or something. And it's, the fall and everything's very brown and dull. And it's that kind of movie, not a lot of excitement going on. And also as somebody who hasn't had their hearing and now their hearing is coming back and they're learning to use their voice and communicate better. So it's a very soft movie, but I felt like their soft performance then just didn't work for me, but not necessarily their fault. It was the tone of the movie.
Sure.
So I think also at the beginning when they are experiencing this world without sound and we're watching that's when I was most engaged in their performance. It was when their voice came back and the hearing loss was no longer a factor that it started losing me, much like Chloe lost her hearing at age 8. Am I right?
I see what
when
you
the sound
there.
came back, it felt like them losing their hearing to begin with was just a tool to get to this other product, and that it wasn't even necessary to the story. So then it started losing me and becoming more of a traditional thing we've seen.
Sure, and that actually then brings me nicely to, I mentioned in my spoiler-free thoughts that there were things that on their own in this movie I thought were really brilliant and effective, but that is that first montage when she wakes up and she realizes she's hearing again. Now, obviously, this had to be somebody who had lost their hearing somewhere along the way, right? Because they have to immediately understand, oh my God, I'm hearing again. But that whole montage of just the various sounds and things that she's doing to hear things, like that sequence is like, if you're an ASMR person, oh my God, it is just
hearing popcorn
beautiful
for the
ASMR.
first time.
Yeah,
oh.
She just just ear pressed to the microwave, listening to the popcorn pop, and it's recorded so so close, like there's very little ambient sound here. You're mostly just listening to the popcorn pop with Chloe. That sequence was phenomenally well done. Another example of the sound design here being
I was gonna say the sound
really
design
effective.
just carries it. Yeah.
But again, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to divert just a little bit and tell you that I had seen something online about somebody who got their hearing back and they were surprised that the sun didn't make a sound. And I just had to inject that in here because they had never heard before. And then they could suddenly hear and they thought the sun was screaming all the time. And they were surprised that it's silent. But then it turns out the sun does make sound and just doesn't travel through space and reach us. So I just had to throw that fun fact in here.
Oh,
so,
well, yeah, it's a giant ball. It's a giant ball of burning gas. I bet it sounds an awful lot like fire.
Exactly. So they were surprised that it didn't make a sound, and I've been thinking about that since I realized that this was a movie about somebody getting sound.
Can you imagine if the sun just went around screaming all day?
That's a Rick and Morty episode.
Oh, yes, it is. Oh, my God. It is. Wow. Okay.
Anyway, proceed. We are just all over the place. So, it's a Friday. TGIF.
Right. So, guys, obviously, things about this movie that really positive. Here's again where it didn't, where it collapses for me. First of all, let me ask you, Michelle. Did you enjoy, say, roughly the first half of this movie, everything up to when she wakes up and the doctor is gone that next morning because the doctor comes to visit her? They have that sequence where it seems like there might be like a love interest thing developing just out of the blue for no reason at all. More on that in a minute. And then she wakes up the next morning and Sophia is gone. I thought this movie up until
you're not
going to
let me answer?
I'm sorry. No. So, well,
it is rhetorical, but I am in complete agreement that is where it lost me. That is
Yeah,
the exact moment. Although for me, it was a little bit earlier. It was when she began hitting on the doctor. I felt physically uncomfortable to the point that I was pulled out, and it never got me back.
Yeah, I want to talk about that scene because that scene makes so little sense to me in the context of the rest of this movie. It comes completely out of nowhere. There's literally no build to it at all. And then it's just gone, and we never come back to it as a character element or a story element. It felt like it was there because they thought it had to be there. And it was so out of place with the rest of everything. It was very uncomfortable and weird. I don't know. Tell me what your thoughts were on that scene.
I physically cringed. It made me so uncomfortable. And up until that, although Chloe was, very soft spoken and threw me off a little bit, I overall had no reason to dislike her. That was when I felt like, ooh, this is so, ooh, oh no, oh, Chloe, what are you doing? That it removed me. Now I was kind of on you're misguided or something has gone wrong and I don't like it.
Right, yeah, I think there's, I don't not understand it, right? What they're clearly trying to do is what's the name I'm looking for? A Florence Nightingale effect sort of thing, it's her doctor, she's an attractive young lady, she's also done these incredible things to help Chloe get her hearing back, and, but it just has nothing at all to do with the rest of the movie. And it's very, very awkward and very unpleasant in a lot of ways. I don't understand it at all.
I think part of it, too, is that it is right after one of those moments that is one of the highlights for the film for me. There are 3 specific highlights, so I'll just talk about them really quick. The first is the opening and experiencing the world as Chloe's experiencing it without sound, or at least very muffled sound, which we talked about. The second one, which we haven't talked about yet, is her drilling through the floor, placing the light so that she can go a floor down and see where that sound is coming from now. That I thought was just beautiful. The way that she steps into the light and is now blue while everything behind her is red is such a beautiful image. You see the dust floating through the air. I thought that was one of the most beautiful scenes from this entire movie. But one of the other ones was when she's in the bar talking to her doctor, and she starts smiling because her soda sounds like static. And I thought that was like wow, I've never realized that. And as a viewer, you realize that's kind of creepy because obviously static has a lot going on. But for somebody to pick up that sound and find a way to loop it back into the static, I thought that was very beautiful. And the way that she had been just hearing music in the bar and just zoning out and the lights change, all of that was just so beautiful. And then right after that, I was physically uncomfortable. And then the plot went off the rails.
Yeah, it from that point forward, when they start delving into what's happening here, it brings me to more things like I mentioned where I just don't understand why they were there. There's this little thing that they hint at in Chloe's flashbacks, and Hank talks about it. But Joshua has some sort of connection to animal mutilation, and it's unclear if it's maybe it's just like some kind of taxidermy, but maybe it's something else. They hint at this, and there's a couple of particularly gruesome mutilated animals in the film. You should probably be aware of that. Maybe we should have said something earlier, but here we are. But again, that's just there, and they never address it. They never do anything with it. It's like the only reason it's there is to try and add to Josh being a red herring and make it more believable that he might be the bad guy. And I feel like there was plenty to make it seem like Josh might be the bad guy. I mean, they introduce him in a creepy, blurred out shot in the background at that store, and then he just follows her out of the store and watches her walk down the street. Okay, success. You've done it. You've established your red herring. And I
He's
felt
watching
like
her in her house from another building.
Yeah.
Was that not enough?
Yeah, I don't need the mutilated animals. I don't know what you were driving at there, except to maybe, I don't know, maybe you wanted to put mutilated birds in your movie. I don't know. But so that was odd. And then that whole scene where, like, here's what I thought was happening, right? I thought, like, I had this complete idea, and it comes from that scene you were talking about where she drills through the floor and then she shines the light and goes down and she marks an X on the floor. They did this brilliant thing that was so effective that it led me to this thought. I thought she was inevitably going to find her mother's corpse under the house. Like, because when they first introduced that noise, she's up in her bedroom and she moves her head around on the floor and it gets louder and softer based on where her head is. And so she figures, okay, this is the loudest spot. That's where she drills the hole. And then when she goes down, it's even louder on that floor. And I thought, okay, so this is like her mom didn't disappear. She's dead. She's in that house. It was probably her dad that did it. And she's hearing her mom, like, it was pretty obvious pretty quickly that she was hearing her mom's ghost, right? But I thought that would have been a really effective story, even having sort of had that thought, like that, just that idea of the physically closer we get to the ghost or the corpse, it's similar to, have you ever seen Stir of Echoes?
I don't remember.
Which
doesn't mean that I haven't
early,
seen
like,
it, but
Sixth Sense era, late 90s ghost movie. Anyway, reminded me of the story in that in a lot of ways.
Wow, spoiler alert for a movie probably from like the 80s or something. I
didn't say. I said it reminded me of the story in that movie.
But then the Sixth Sense, wow. Are there ghosts in that movie too? You want to ruin everything?
I did at one point sit here watching this film and be like, "Oh, I hear dead people."
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, but no, I thought that was an interesting element. I'm not even sure where I was going with that to begin with, because you derailed me with
elements that don't quite fit. I have another one,
right.
And this is particularly why I wanted to leave the second sentence off the description, because it was also something I wanted to talk about. So the IMDb description says Chloe Graydon undergoes an experimental procedure to restore her hearing. You guys heard that, unless you skipped the beginning of the episode and just got to this point. Then hello, welcome. We watch Shudder. But then the second sentence, so she begins to suffer from auditory hallucinations related to the vanishing of her mother. My issue is that her doctor assumes that she's having auditory hallucinations because she didn't disclose that she's on medication. And I thought that was another thing that didn't have to be added. It felt completely unnecessary, like, oh, now you're painting her as a crazy person. But this is a person who hasn't heard anything for 12 years. How is she supposed to know if something is a hallucination? Like, if she hears a lawnmower outside, does she remember what that sound is? You know, everything probably feels like a hallucination because you're trying to figure out, where is this sound coming from? Everything is so loud and so overwhelming that I felt like that was unnecessary to be like, oh, you're hallucinating. And it's like, no, she might just be hearing a vacuum cleaner and she can't see it and doesn't remember. Like, I thought it was just ridiculous to try to throw that in. And that was just another thing, like the red herring, where it's like, oh, this is obvious, or like drilling and finding the body. Like, yeah, we've seen this before. And then like, oh, you're clearly crazy because you're on antidepressants. It felt like they took a lot of movie tropes and put them in this film that started out so beautifully, and then the ending turns into yet another movie trope and drove me. I hated the ending. I was mad about it. Anyway, before we get to the ending,
tell me specifically what you didn't like about the ending.
The fact that it just turns into her running away from a killer. Something we've seen
I see what
so
you mean.
many times.
I thought you were talking about like literally like the last 10, 15 seconds, the ending.
Oh.
But
no, that was fine. It was just the
Yeah,
fact that it's like, all of this build up with this really fascinating auditory experience and using all this sound design,
Yeah.
and then you're just putting me in the ending of a slasher film. I was so disappointed, and that really, I mean, I love the sound design. Like I said, I love Lachlan Watson. I didn't love this performance, but I didn't hate it either. And like I said, there were a lot of parts that brought me in, but the second half just went off the rails, and then that ending was just like, I've seen this. Why didn't you keep doing the stuff that you were doing in the beginning? You didn't need all of this. It was so beautiful.
And once again, bringing me to something that they just briefly dumped in here, but then didn't do anything with. There is that element of, so she starts to get her hearing back, but now she can hear these things. But then we also find out that apparently Josh can hear some of these things as well, and so he built all this equipment to try and hear it better. And then we find out that apparently the killer hears these things too, but we just find those things out incidentally, and they never do anything with it at all. It's just like, oh no, you're just hearing the ghosts. That's it.
Yep.
Man, there's no depth here. It's just like, it's literally a device is all it is. There's no story in that element. It's just like, oh, some people can hear ghosts. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
I hear dead people. Like you said,
you went to a lot of effort to create a situation that ultimately amounts to, oh, sometimes people can hear ghosts, and when she got her hearing back, she could hear ghosts now. And it turns out
it's not even
also the person who killed her mother happens to be able to hear ghosts too. That's
what I was going to say. It's not even as straightforward. The plot has to, or the script has to do this thing where it's like, oh, now you can also hear the ghost, but not everybody can hear the ghost, but you can. And also the person who killed your mom. It's not like, oh, suddenly you're hearing ghosts and that makes sense. It still can't even do that straightforward. It was so complicated. And the beginning was so slow and had these long scenes and her, freshening up the house and these texts back and forth with her father. And then we just get bombarded with so much stuff. I kind of have a theory that what they were trying to do, and this might be giving them too much credit, but I will give them the credit because I really didn't like it otherwise. I think when her hearing came back, she was so overwhelmed by the sound that then what they were trying to do was overwhelm us with the story in the way that she had all of this information coming in. We were getting all this information. We were feeling very uncomfortable about her first time flirting since getting her hearing back, probably in the way that she felt uncomfortable flirting with the first time getting her hearing back and getting her learning to hear her voice, and then hearing herself hitting on somebody and being like, oh God, is that what I sound like? Maybe they were just trying to make us feel overwhelmed in the way that Chloe was, because I don't understand otherwise how we went from such a simple, beautiful beginning of the story to what we got at the end. There's so much.
It turns a corner, and again, for me as well, the story just falls apart, which is real unfortunate. Because I do agree with you. Again, sound design in the movie is fantastic. I also want to point out, while the sound design is definitely a focus because it's a movie about hearing loss and regaining your hearing, there's also, in addition to not just that shot you mentioned, because it is a beautiful shot when that light is shining down through the floor and the focus is pulled close so you can see the dust, and then it shifts in on her. And the dust completely vanishes, even though the camera itself has not moved. All that happened is they adjusted the lens to change the focus. And so there's almost like a ghost effect there, right? Because like we know it's there, but it's not there anymore. I thought that was great. Just like I mentioned, the shot when she's in the store and Josh just kind of steps into the background in blurry focus. I thought some of the stuff they did with like the static and lights from the TV, especially in that heightened energy climax, even though it was from a story perspective, a very by the book sort of, oh, there's a murderer ending. I thought they did some interesting visual things there. One thing I wish they had done in relation to those visual things is at least tell me give me one suggestion as to maybe why all of these videotapes look like you're watching scrambled cable, trying to see titties when you're 15 years old, at home. Like what?
Wait,
like was
that
the VC? Was the
I didn't
VCR
go through that
damaged?
phase, so okay.
Like, was the VCR damaged? All the tapes, were the tapes literally possessed by ghosts? I don't know. I was
gonna say ghosts, electrical interference, maybe.
Right, and I guess maybe the idea is it's tied into that same stuff that Josh was talking about with all of his monitoring. But then, like, how did they ever watch movies at this place? Right? That just, just another thing. But as a production, the sound design and visually is some really enjoyable stuff here. I'm definitely going to go back, and because here's what I do know, is this movie was directed by Jeffrey A. Brown, but was written by Michael and Sean Rasmussen. Jeffrey A. Brown's first Shudder original, The Beach House, is one that he also wrote. And so I'm going to go back and check that one out, I think, to see, if there's, how it compares to this, and see if maybe I'm able to get something more out of his direction. Not specifically his direction of his own story, but just his direction of somebody else's script, right? Because I think ultimately you distill this down, and from the discussion, it seems like for most of our problems with this is just the story just wasn't there, right? It just wasn't. Yeah. It wasn't at least for the second half of the movie. It started building up these great ideas and then just kind of collapsed on itself.
Yeah. Now I'm looking at his IMDb, meaning Jeffrey A. Brown's, and I'm fascinated that most of his career has been location management on things that I enjoy.
Yeah.
He's only directed 4 things, but he was additional crew for many things, and he did location management on the OA, which the first season was great, The Dead Don't Die, Girls, The Wolf of Wall Street, location scout for that. So I just think that's interesting that maybe he got really good at figuring out, like how the setting is so important to this movie, this remote cabin, that's how he was able to nail the atmosphere of this empty house with nobody except Chloe in it.
That's also something
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to point out, and I'm glad you mentioned that, is one thing I just really enjoyed about this movie from a set perspective is like even Chloe's house is not like some big extravagant lake house, right? Like, it's a decent house. It's certainly more than a lot of people could afford, but it's not like your typical extravagant lakeside horror mansion. And then there's also like those cottages that Josh's mom owns, and he lives in one of them, and they're just, I like that it didn't it didn't go for like the ritzy seaside resort sort of thing. It's still the vacation place, but this is a vacation place where like normal people would go, right? And you just don't see that sort of thing very often. I thought that was a pretty unique selection.
I grew up in an area very similar to this because, of course, Minnesota, lots of lakes, so lots of lake houses. Our town was in between many different lakes. And so you're correct that we don't see that a lot in film, and it did feel kind of nice and evoke the sense of nostalgia because it's kind of like cabins, but they're not a destination place where you're just going for a weekend. It's a cabin you actually live in, and
right.
You don't see that very often where it's a lake house, that it's not a lake house, it's a lake home.
Right. That's a good way to put it. Also, I need to, however, I need to talk to Joshua about what the fuck are those weird yellow smears all over his walls? That was like, I get that they were trying to make the place look filthy, but that I'm on second thought, maybe I don't want to ask that question because there were just these random weird yellow smears all over the wall, and it was super gross.
I just don't want to have a conversation with Joshua at all. I'd probably block him on Facebook and then move on with my life.
That's probably
Joshua,
Shout
gonna
out to
say
that
that
actor.
Oh.
Stop it.
I'm
Brendan
sorry.
Meyer.
Shout out to that actor. Yeah, good.
Yeah, Brendan Meyer, you did an incredible job of being real fucking creepy, bud.
Yeah, if they had taken just a couple steps back, remove the smears on the wall, remove the taxidermy, remove as much of the creepy stalker vibe, and then it turns out he's just fascinated with the house, and he and Chloe go on this like auditory adventure to figure out what's going on together, which is what I kind of thought was happening, but I had already become so uncomfortable about Joshua as a character that I didn't want him to become a bigger part of the film. But if that's a different direction that they had gone with that also would have been fine. I think we've seen this with other films, but when movies have multiple writers, sometimes it feels like their ideas don't come together. And I think that really happened with this. And I'm wondering if they just kind of kept putting parts together that didn't mesh.
Well, it's
kind of what it feels
you
like.
say that. This film was written by Michael Rasmussen and Sean Rasmussen. They each have a total of 6 writer credits, and they're all the same. They are a writing
they are
team.
a writing duo.
They have, yes, and I'm gonna guess brothers based on the fact that they have the same last name. But there are 6 films that they've written. The only one that I recognize by name is called The Ward from 2010, which was the last feature film ever directed by John Carpenter to date, as of right now. You never know when the man's going to come back around. But,
The Ward was very good at setting atmosphere and then went a little off the rails too. I liked The Ward, but it suffered from some of what this film does, if I'm remembering The Ward correctly, which based on the poster I have not forgotten. But it did kind of the same thing where it started great and then it went a little too crazy. So maybe this is just their style, and I'm not a fan of their style.
Could very well be.
And they did Crawl. Crawl did the same thing for me, where it started and I was intrigued and then went a little off the rails. Okay, I've seen a lot of their stuff, and there are a lot of people who like it, but I just might not enjoy it.
Well,
it just might not be
Michelle,
for me then.
Maybe you've learned something about yourself today.
I've learned that Crawl, The Inhabitants, and Dark Feed, 3 movies out of the 6 that they have written, have very similar movie posters. That's what I've learned.
They do. They really do.
That looks like
really
a trilogy. And now I want to go back and watch them, where the last movie of the trilogy winds up being Crawl, which is the girl from Skins is escaping an alligator. I don't know what the first 2 movies in that series look like, but I'm going to find out.
Oh. Well, guys, so that's I think everything that needs to be said by either one of us about
everything
about
that
the
could
Unheard.
be said.
Yeah.
We have nothing left.
I mean, again, as always, we strongly recommend you at least, give it your own shot. If it sounds like something you might even remotely be into, it's available on Shudder right now as of today. But give it a watch, see what you think. Maybe you'll be like, these 2 don't know what the fuck they're talking about, and that's entirely possible.
I listened to our conversation just now for the last almost 50 minutes, and I agree that we might not know what we're talking about.
We might just be a couple of weirdos who have entirely too much free time.
We absolutely
on their
are.
hands. Yeah.
Definitely.
But if you appreciate that weirdness, guys, I mentioned earlier we are all over social media. It's at We Watch Shudder on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. We've had an at We Watch Shudder TikTok for, God, how long now, Michelle?
Almost a year.
Almost a year. How many TikToks have we posted, Michelle?
How many have we posted? 0. How many thoughts do I have written down and at least somewhat come to finish and have folders of material and things half started? Many. But how many times have I lost my nerve and decided that nobody wants to see this? All of them.
Every single one.
So our TikTok remains empty for now. I keep thinking of really things I'm like, this is really funny for me, which means no one else will like it.
I So yeah, you can get at us there. You can shoot us an email if you still do that. mail@wewatchshudder.com. We have yet to receive a single listener email, Michelle, and that makes me sad. Somebody email us a movie review request. Yeah, we've gotten messages everywhere. We got Facebooks. We got Instagram
gonna say we get messages.
We get tweeted.
But you want email.
Nobody's sending us any damn emails. I set up this email for a reason. Well, I set up this email to use it to log into Podbean is why I did it, but it's fine.
Oh, I used it for my Pornhub account. I figure I didn't want it linked to my real one.
That's
actually, fun fact, because why not? We're already this far into it. I do have a Pornhub account, not as a poster. Hang on. I have a Pornhub account, and it's because back when Hamilton was not on Disney Plus, there was a video on Pornhub called "Our Founding Fathers Getting Freaky in the Cabinet," and it was a bootleg version of Hamilton, and it was the only access I had to be able to watch it because I'm a broke bitch. So I got a Pornhub account just so I could download Our Freaky Fathers Getting Freaky, or Our Founding Fathers Getting Freaky in the Cabinet, and then it got taken off of Pornhub, and now I have it on Disney, so it's fine. But I just need you to know that's why I have a Pornhub account, or at least that's what I'm telling people.
Well, see, here's the thing: is you could have gone your entire life without ever admitting that to anybody, Michelle.
But why would I do that? I need to tell somebody. It's in my heart. I told friends, hey, go get a Pornhub account. Here's the link. I promise it's not actually porn. And I can't believe how many of my friends trusted me, but they actually did, and they all got Pornhub accounts. You're welcome, Pornhub. I'm getting people to sign up to Shudder and Pornhub. These are my two. I'm an influencer, JD.
I'm just terrified that this is going to turn into We Watch Pornhub, and I really don't know how I'm going to deal with that.
Can we? Can that be our Patreon? I have so many things.
Although
we have so many things to show you.
Facts. Here we are. I'm pretty sure that it was the Pornhub link that I sent you back when we had that long conversation about Joe D'Amato. Who made Anthropophagus and all sorts of other fucked up movies, and then eventually just started making horror pornography. He has the movie called Porno Holocaust, and I was like, it's like a cannibal movie, but then there's also fucking in it, and it's from Italy in like the early '80s, and so I found a link and sent it. Did you ever watch Porno Holocaust, Michelle?
I did bookmark it, but I have not watched it yet because I'm like, every time I'm like, do I feel like watching Porno Holocaust or something good? The something good always wins out. Except the other day I made that decision and then I lost anyway because it was Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, which I'm still very mad about. And I would like to do a bonus episode about. I would like to do a bonus episode.
Guess I'm gonna. Where did you see it? Did you see it on the VOD?
Yes, the VOD.
Well, then
I can't remember which one we used.
Maybe, Michelle, we haven't done one of these in a while. Maybe I will give it a watch and we'll do a Ghoul blog.
That would be great because I was live tweeting to friends how I know many ways to make Winnie the Pooh scary and they did not implement any of them.
Oh.
So, listeners, this is your sneak preview.
They called it Blood and Honey, but they didn't spell honey HUNNY like Pooh spells it on his honey jar. I thought that was the most obvious fucking thing, and they didn't do it.
I promise that's not going to be the most obvious thing about that movie that then upsets you that they didn't do it. I'm going to give you a hint. It has to do with clothing choices. We're going to watch this movie. We're going to do a Ghoul blog. Okay. We're going to do a Ghoul blog.
All right, guys. Hey, thank you so much for once again tuning in to another episode of We Watch Shudder. Check us out on all the social medias. Check out WeWatchShudder.com. What are we talking about next week, Michelle? Did I sneak it in on you
Probably
again?
Porn. Somehow probably porn. But the movie will be called We Go On, and it is not on Pornhub, sadly. It is on
it's on
X-Rabbit? X-Hamster. X-Hamster.
Oh, good Lord. It's on Shudder, guys. We Go On. It's an archive title, so we'll be talking about that one next week. Otherwise, I think that's about it. Say good afternoon, Michelle.
Good afternoon, Michelle. Makes no sense out of context because usually it's say goodnight, Michelle, and then I say goodnight, but saying good afternoon is very different at the end of the episode. Okay, bye. Have a great weekend.
God, say goodnight, Michelle.
Good night, Michelle.